Chapter 2752. Gu Jingyu's body stiffened bit by bit. Bit by bit, from a slight tremble, it gradually became bigger and bigger. His heart was empty. His suppressed emotions made his nose feel a little sour. Boundless anger surged from his chest. At this moment his mind was completely blank. His mind was filled with Yi Luo's smile and frown. Obviously, they had only met a few times. Why did he have such deep feelings for her? So deep that even he himself couldn't believe it. It was as though his thoughts were controlling his body. Gu Jingyu strode towards Demo Xian's direction. He grabbed Demo Xian's sleeve, baring his teeth and glaring at him. His entire face was contorted in anger. His eyes were red and the gentleness was long gone. Aren't you Yi Luo's fiancé? Why didn't you save her? Why didn't you stop him? Gu Jingyu's sudden action made the surrounding guests believe in Yan Zhenfei's words. Yan Xiaoyi heard the surrounding guests' discussion. She frowned and was about to step forward to stop Gu Jingyu. The tall and slender man gently flicked the sleeve of his robe that was being pulled. In an instant an invisible pressure came pouring down. The air around him seemed to be rioting at this moment. Gu Jingyu's hand had just touched Demo Xian. But it was pushed away by this invisible wave. Gu Jingyu staggered for a while and almost fell to the ground. He didn't hurry to steady himself but continued to stare at Demo Xian with bloodshot eyes. His voice was hoarse. You're not fit to be Yi Luo's fiancé. If it's me, I won't bear to let her suffer any harm. Young sect master Gu. Yan Xiaoyi's face turned pale when she heard Gu Jingyu's words. She quickly berated him sternly. Young sect master Gu, please conduct yourself with dignity. Luo and young sect master Gu are not related at all. Don't tell me you're trying to take the opportunity to ruin Luo's reputation by saying such misleading words. Gu Jingyu's eyes lit up for a moment. He stared blankly for a moment and lowered his eyes as he spoke in a hoarse voice. I'm just feeling indignant for Yi Luo. The square was deathly silent. The guests even stopped talking. What if young sect master Gu and Miss Yi didn't have an affair? They wouldn't believe it even if they were beaten to death. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell. Young sect master Gu's feelings for Miss Yi were very deep. Looks like emissary Yan was right. Yi Luo was a promiscuous woman who could sleep with any man. Every outstanding man wanted to get close to her and become her backer. The reactions of the guests and the red figure that disappeared among the guards of the Palace of Darkness. This caused the smile on Yan Zhenfei's face to deepen. Although she was smiling, her eyes were terrifyingly sinister. He could almost see her distorted facial features under the veil. Damn little slut. A counterfeit dared to strut around in front of her, the emissary of the Palace of Darkness. And he even tried to threaten her with her weakness? Now she wanted to see if that fake still had any life left to threaten her. Everyone in the world who knew her identity deserved to die. All of them must die. Now a fake had died. Next was Yan Xiaoyi, her dear sister. Yan Zhenfei had already constructed a beautiful picture of the future in her mind. Just when everyone thought that the dust had settled, a voice suddenly rang out from the crowd. Suddenly, a deep, low and hoarse voice rang out clearly in this silent atmosphere. Chapter 2753. Almost instinctively, the crowd looked in the direction of the voice respectfully. The man wearing half a mask with a pair of black inky eyes was deep and cold without a single ripple. Just a gaze. It stunned the entire crowd. This was the aura of a real strong man. Compared to the pretentious aura of the secluded palace, it made people submit from the bottom of their hearts. This man, who was he? Countless people's hearts raised this doubt. Yan Zhenfei, on the other side, also had her eyes glued on Demo Xian. In her eyes, there was an unconcealable yearning. Such a noble and powerful man. Only he could be worthy of her. This man was hers. Was hers. It could be said that all the ladies present had the same thought in their minds. They wanted to take him for themselves. But they also felt that he was sacred and noble, unattainable. At this moment the man wearing half a mask opened his mouth again. His voice was bone-chilling. If Lil Luo can't defeat those people, I will naturally take action. His gaze slowly fell on Gu Jingyu. The icy cold like December's frost covered Gu Jingyu's body. Demo Xian continued, in this world no one can hurt Lil Luo, or not even myself can't. His words ended. Both eyes had already returned to the place where they were surrounded by those 10 overguards. Just for a moment. The man's icy cold gaze was like the blooming of spring flowers. The smooth lines of his clean chin also at this moment softened. Such a huge contrast made everyone's reverence towards Zhou Xian intensified. And when Gu Jingyu, Yan Zhenfei and the rest heard Zhou Xian's first sentence, their expressions were different. Gu Jingyu was stunned at first. His face, which was filled with anger, gradually calmed down. He stared blankly at the direction Zhou Xian was looking at. This man's meaning was. He didn't make a move. His Yiluo was fine. Yiluo. Fine. Yan Zhenfei's face also darkened. After realizing Zhou Xian's words, she suddenly reacted to something. She immediately shouted sternly, "Come back. You bunch of trash. Come and protect this messenger." A light and melodious laughter rang in Yan Zhenfei's ears. It was a smile that seemed to have come from hell. Yan Zhenfei's body froze. It's too late. That laughter was softly spitting out words. The next moment, Yan Zhenfei felt a cold and soft finger around her neck. His nails were as sharp as blades. It was as if it could easily cut through her skin. It was the girl in red who had been surrounded and attacked by more than 10 guards of the Palace of Darkness and had been engulfed. When did she rush in front of Emissary Yan? What incredible speed! To be able to escape from such a tight encirclement and even subdue the emissary of the Palace of Darkness. The crowd had once again refreshed their view of Yi Qingluo's ability. When did you? Yan Zhenfei's throat was clutched and it was difficult for her to speak. Yi Qingluo laughed beside her ear. Just now. There was a faint smile on her face. It was not the smug smile he had after escaping the encirclement of the guards. Nor was it the vengeful smile he had when he choked Yan Zhenfei. Chapter 2754. The dozen or so guards were also stunned at this moment. They turned their heads in unison and looked at Yan Zhenfei, whose neck was being strangled. There was no expression on their faces, but they didn't continue to attack. They lined up in a row, facing Yi Qingluo's direction. They were like a dozen puppets waiting for the final order. Yan Zhenfei was so frightened by Yi Qingluo that her entire body was trembling. A suffocating pain came from her neck, causing her to be filled with the desire to live. Save me! Save me! 10 overguards stood at their original spots. Yi Qingluo squinted her eyes as her gaze swept past those expressionless faces in front of her. A guess in the bottom of her heart slowly formed. She pursed her lips and moved her fingers slightly on Yan Zhenfei's neck. Following that, her lips curled as a bloodthirsty smile appeared in her eyes. She lowered her head and leaned close to Yan Zhenfei's ear as she whispered softly, "Looks like as an envoy you're a failure. You're spouting rubbish." Yan Zhenfei retorted with difficulty, "I'm the envoy of the Palace of Darkness. You kill me. If you kill me, they will not let you off." Yi Qingluo's brows rose as she was interested. "Then why don't we try?" Just nice she could try her guess. Yi Qingluo grabbed Yan Zhenfei's neck as she raised her eyes and smiled at the row of guards in front of her. "You people from the Palace of Darkness are merely so. You've been spreading it so mysteriously, even saying that you want to surpass the Imperial Palace. From what I see, you're not even half of the Imperial Palace." There was a hint of laughter in her voice. Following that, she tilted her head and blinked her long eyelashes as she gave an innocent smile. "Originally, on account that we're old acquaintances. Plus today it's the Miao tribe's Saintess's selection ceremony. I didn't intend to disgrace you, such a pity." She intentionally paused for a moment. Her voice was mixed with a treacherous chill. "If you don't do it, you won't die. Since Envoy Yan loves to do it, then I'll fulfill your wish. Let you and your Palace of Darkness scram from heaven to hell." Yi Qingluo didn't intentionally control her volume for the first few sentences. He lowered his voice when he said the last sentence. The cold and deep voice was like a deadly lock, seeping into Yan Zhenfei's heart bit by bit. Almost reflexively, Yan Zhenfei screamed out, her face pale. The surrounding guests were in an uproar again. Could it be that Envoy Yan and Yi Luo were old acquaintances? An old acquaintance? Emissary Yan was from the upper realm. In other words, this Yi Luo was also from the upper realm? No wonder he had such a high cultivation at such a young age. Only those godlike people from the upper realm could be so perverted. After knowing that Yi Luo was from the three upper realms, everyone's attitude immediately changed. Yi Luo was right. From the beginning to the end, it was Yan Feifei who used the power of the Palace of Darkness to show off and threaten Elder Miao, forcing Yi Luo and the others, who were sitting in the first row, to move to the last row. If not for Yan Feifei's provocation, Yan Feifei would not have been kicked to the bench and ended up in this situation. If he didn't do it, he wouldn't die. The new image was very appropriate. Yi Luo. Squatting by the side, the pale-faced Sun Yutong grabbed Mei's robes in fear. Chapter 2755. All right, it's not impossible to let her go. Yiqing Luo replied straightforwardly as her brows were filled with smiles. She raised her brows and the long arc at the corner of her eyes made her look rather evil. Sun Yutong was stunned as she didn't expect Yiqing Luo to be so easygoing. What do you want to do? Yiqing Luo only smiled as she lowered her eyes to look at Yan Zhenfei, who was wearing a veil, but it was unable to conceal her pale face as she asked with a smile. Does Messenger Yan want to live? Yes. She naturally wanted to live. Who didn't want to live? She had put in so much effort in order to live on. Even to the extent of betraying her everything. How could she possibly not want to live? But Yan Zhenfei was very clear. Yiqing Luo would not let her live. At least she wouldn't let her live easily. No matter how anxious she was. Yan Zhenfei finally opened her eyes wide as she tried her best to look at her calmly. Your motive? Yiqing Luo raised her brows as she looked at the direction of those guards. Order them to leave the Miao tribe. Yan Zhenfei's eyes flashed as her body shuddered slightly. She bit her lips tightly. No. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes as she smiled. As she smiled, her slender fingers tightened. Yiqing Luo was smiling. Her smile was gentle and her eyes were calm. Totally not like someone who was using her hands to kill someone. But from Yan Zhenfei's struggling strength and that voice which could no longer speak. It had all been verified. Yiqing Luo really wanted to kill Yan Zhenfei. No. Sun Yutong instantly panicked. The Misty Palace's messenger was her only reliance now. If Yan Zhenfei died, who would bear the Misty Palace's anger? Yi Luo? No. Yi Luo was not only the person beside her, he was respected and powerful. Yi Luo herself was so powerful that no one could fathom her strength. Misty Palace would definitely take it out on the Sun family. Yiqing Luo actually loosened the strength of her fingers. After that, she smiled as she looked at Yan Zhenfei, who had just escaped death, panting miserably. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. What does Messenger Yan think? She asked with a light smile. Yan Zhenfei finally escaped the suffocating pain. Hearing Yiqing Luo's words, Yan Zhenfei's body suddenly trembled. He wanted to speak, but he was afraid of the pain he had just experienced. But Yiqing Luo didn't give Yan Zhenfei any time to hesitate. Yiqing Luo's eyes curved. Why? Are you still unwilling to withdraw your guards? She clicked her tongue and glanced at the guards who were standing as straight as a ramrod. Soon after, she shook her head and said, You are really a good-for-nothing envoy. Even your own subordinates are unwilling to save you. So even if you leave these guards in the Miao tribe, what's the point? Yiqing Luo's voice wasn't soft. The guests also pricked up their ears, wishing they could hear the gossip clearly. After hearing Yiqing Luo's words, the guests were in an uproar. Speaking of which, this emissary from the Palace of Darkness seems a little strange. Yes. I feel that the guards of the Palace of Darkness don't care about her life at all. How can a guard ignore his master's life like this? I realized something was wrong a long time ago, but I didn't dare to say it. Didn't you feel it? Right from the start, Messenger Yan couldn't order these guards around. It was until she brought out the reputation of the Palace of Darkness before these guards started to take action. It seemed that only Sun family's young miss and that young Miss May kept on flattering her. But those guards from the Palace of Darkness totally didn't treat her as their master. Chapter 2756. Listening to the guests' discussions. Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes in satisfaction. She had this idea in her mind. Didn't Yan Zhenfei like to bully others? Didn't she like to use her status as the gloomy palace's emissary to enjoy everyone's flattery? Didn't she like to be the center of attention, to be under one but above all? Then she would shatter Yan Zhenfei's beautiful dream. To let Yan Zhenfei fall from the high and mighty emissary of the upper realm. To become the scum of everyone's ridicule. Now Yiqing Luo could totally verify her guess. These gloomy palaces guards totally didn't listen to Yan Zhenfei's arrangements. It could also be said that Yan Zhenfei's status in Gloomy Palace, although her name sounded better than these guards, but her actual power wasn't comparable to these guards. This made Yiqing Luo couldn't help but think deeper. Yan Zhenfei originally followed Wolf Saint technique and left West Continent, which meant to say Yan Zhenfei wanted to treat herself as the second Yiqing Qian. After getting close to Wolf Saint technique, dark forces together with some other forces built a gloomy palace. Yan Zhenfei was able to become the gloomy palace's emissary, swaggering around Nirvana Realm, recruiting cultivators for Nirvana Realm. It must be Wolf Saint technique's doing. However, Yan Zhenfei's actual power was just an undeserved reputation. Could it be further assumed that dark forces in Gloomy Palace only played a pivotal role? Yiqing Luo's gaze shot towards that side of the guards once again as her eyes flickered slightly. These guards had some problems. Although currently she wasn't sure what was wrong. But she could be sure. These guards were different from ordinary people. If these people were really Gloomy Palace's guards, the power behind this Gloomy Palace was probably hard to deal with. After confirming Yan Zhenfei's status in Gloomy Palace, Yiqing Luo also didn't have the intention to continue teasing Yan Zhenfei. Yan Zhenfei, you should feel lucky. Today is the day my brother Miao Yi takes part in the Sacred Maiden selection, so it's not suitable to see blood. Yiqing Luo laughed lightly as she let go of Yan Zhenfei's neck. Yan Zhenfei's body seemed to have lost all her energy as she fell limply onto the ground. Big Sister Yan. Sun Yutong was just about to go over. Yiqing Luo's brows rose as she smiled and blocked her path. What I said is that I won't kill her today, but it doesn't mean that you can bring her away. She didn't want to let the tiger return to the mountain. Although Yan Zhenfei could only be considered a sickly cat at best. But no matter how sick the cat is, when it came to annoying people it was quite annoying. Last time in the West Continent, letting Yan Zhenfei escape with the Wolf Saint technique was an accident. This time, Yan Zhenfei took the initiative to deliver herself. A cold intent flashed past Yiqing Luo's eyes, and following that, she looked towards a certain direction behind her. Xiaoyi, how about I leave this person to you? Yan Xiaoyi, who was called out, suddenly froze. Yan Xiaoyi's gaze landed on the battered woman who was panting heavily on the ground. Her hands gradually clenched into fists. All right. A word was spat out from her mouth with great force. Yiqing Luo's brows rose as her vision shifted onto Qiao Jin as she pouted her lips. Qiao Jin understood her meaning as he gently held Yan Xiaoyi's hand and said in a low voice, I'll bring her over, later Yi will help you trap her in the gu array. Saying that, Qiao Jin walked towards Yiqing Luo. He was about to bend down and lift up the battered woman on the ground. Suddenly, the hair by the side of his face suddenly floated messily. Chapter 2757. At the same time, a gust of raging wind suddenly rose, sweeping across the place where Qiao Jin was standing earlier. Boom boom boom. The deafening sound of the explosion reverberated through the air. A huge pit was formed on the ground. Dust billowed as it filled the surroundings. The ground also gave off a short period of tremors. Qiao Jin hadn't avoided it earlier. Qiao Jin would definitely be buried in that huge pit by now. The horizon seemed to have been covered with a thick layer of ink in a split second. It was a patch of darkness, making one feel suffocated. The surrounding guests were stunned by the sudden change in the surroundings. What's going on? What's going on? Why did the weather suddenly change? Numerous terrified discussions resounded in the public square. The guests' hearts had an indescribable feeling of uneasiness as it kept on surging. Yiqing Luo's slender brows creased slightly as she raised her eyes to look at the dark sky, as her pink lips pursed slightly. She looked at Qiao Jin and asked in a low voice, Are you hurt? Oh. Qiao Jin shook his head as his expression was grave. They don't come with good intentions, be careful. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes. She naturally felt the oppressive feeling from this surge of energy. Indeed, they didn't come with good intentions. Moreover, they were obviously here for her. She sunk her eyes, and between her eyes, there was an obscure glint. Yan Zhenfei has been brought away. Qiao Jin's gaze swept towards the place where Yan Zhenfei laid earlier. The dust dispersed. Indeed, Yan Zhenfei's figure was nowhere to be seen. Even Sun Yutong and Mei, who were not too far away, had also disappeared. The people from secluded palace are here. Qiao Jin immediately reacted. Following that, he instinctively turned around and speedily returned to Yan Xiaoyi's side, as he hugged her shoulders tightly in a protective posture. Secluded palace. Yan Xiaoyi's brows creased tightly as she raised her head and looked at the sky full of thick ink. She's really willing to be in cahoots with the devil for power now. Do you still mind? Qiao Jin asked in a low voice. Mind? Yan Xiaoyi's eyes had a moment of chaos. After some time, her lips twitched as she gave a low laugh. Don't mind, I've never asked for family, so why would I mind? Only, I find it rather amusing. The Yan family had bet all their treasures on Yan Zhenfei. He was even willing to stand on the side of the dark forces for Yan Zhenfei, abandoning the place he grew up in to help the dark forces invade the western continent. Now, Yan Zhenfei didn't just abandon the Yan family. He even sold his soul. If the Yan family knew that the Yan family would end up like this, would he still value Yan Zhenfei without any hesitation back then? She chuckled. As she smiled, the expression on her face returned to her usual calmness. All of this had nothing to do with her. The current her only needed Qiao Jin, Yiqing Luo and the other brothers, and that was enough. Just as the two of them were talking, suddenly the row of guards from the Palace of Darkness started to move in unison. They quickly stood up straight and straightened their backs. Then they cupped their fists and respectfully knelt down in a certain direction in the sky. Welcome, Second Palace Master. The guards' voices were loud and clear. The guests were shocked. They dug their ears and looked at the guards kneeling on the ground in disbelief. What did they say? Second Palace Master? The Second Palace Master of the Palace of Darkness. This bunch of guards who disregarded the orders of Yan Zhenfei, the Palace of Darkness envoy, were kneeling down to welcome the Second Palace Master. Chapter 2758. The sky was filled with thick ink as the black fog surged. Gradually, a black sedan descended from the sky. Surrounding the sedan were 4 beautiful ladies who looked the same as those Palace of Darkness guards. The black veil floated and the figure in the sedan was faintly discernible. Dong! The sedan landed on the ground and a majestic aura spread out in all directions. It made the atmosphere of the grand ceremony to become extremely solemn and solemn. At this moment the guests even breathed cautiously. This was the Second Palace Lord of Darkness's palace? Everyone was shocked by the Second Palace Lord's aura. But Yiqing Luo's focus wasn't on the Second Palace Lord at all. She squinted her eyes as she looked at those guards who were kneeling on the ground. These guards' actions were a little too neat. Back then, the Godless Island's 3 evils, because they were triplets, their hearts were linked so they were able to move as one. But these guards, even if they had been trained together since young, it was impossible for them to be able to do it perfectly right. Furthermore, their voices sounded extremely rigid. As compared to Mou Ying's rigid, it was even more stiff. There was an indescribable strange feeling. These guards. It was probably true and they were hiding some secret. I heard that someone in the Miao tribe bullied our Palace of Darkness's envoy. The lady's cold voice had a special vixen feeling. A fair jade-like hand lifted up the black veil of the sedan. Following that, an exquisitely dressed lady dressed in the Palace of Darkness's long robe walked out. The lady was wearing a black veil, revealing only that pair of fox-like eyes, which could captivate one's soul. This woman's temperament was filled with the natural charm of a fox. Totally not on the same level as Mei's pretentious seductive look. The guests present, even if they were ladies, were captivated by the Second Palace Lord of Darkness's beauty. The Second Palace Lord walked down the sedan and the beautiful maids behind her went forward to support her. The Second Palace Lord's footsteps were elegant and dignified. Her captivating eyes lightly swept past Mei and Yan Zhenfei, who were lying on the side of the sedan. Who hurt the Palace of Darkness's envoy? Who? Mei's voice sounded softly. It was just like a normal question. However, everyone knew that it was just an illusion. The more soul-stirringly beautiful a woman was, the more dangerous it was. Especially when it was a beautiful woman with such a powerful aura and such a noble identity. What was even more dangerous was that it couldn't be touched. Under the immense pressure, everyone turned their gazes towards Yiqing Luo in unison. The Second Palace Master's enchanting eyes curved into crescents as he followed everyone's gaze and looked over. Their eyes met. The second palace master's eyes flickered and he smiled. Why did you injure our palace's envoy? The second palace lord's voice was very gentle. It was impossible to tell that he was here to seek justice for his envoy at all. Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes as she smiled evilly, legitimate self-defense. The deputy palace master tilted his head and continued to ask with a smile. So, it was my emissary who made the first move? Is it important who made the first move? Yiqing Luo had no interest in second palace lord's smiling tiger mask. The deputy palace master did not get angry. Instead he nodded in agreement. Indeed, it's not important. The two of them spoke one after another. The surrounding guests were all dumbfounded. According to the normal development of the plot, shouldn't they take action directly and fight? Chapter 2759. None of the guests had noticed the undercurrent between Yiqing Luo and second palace lord. But that didn't mean that Zhou Xian and the rest couldn't sense it. Zhou Xian poked his own arm as he trembled while looking at Gui Wu. Do all women get along like this? Her face was smiling and her tone was gentle. But every word and sentence was filled with undercurrent. On the other side, Yiqing Luo's smile was tainted with a trace of treachery. She tilted her head as the smile in her eyes became more and more evil. Since it's not important, why did second palace lord ask? Second palace lord seemed to be tired of the confrontation with Yiqing Luo as she lowered her eyes and continued laughing. Young lady, the important thing is, you hurt my envoy. So what does second palace lord intend to do? Yiqing Luo raised her brows evilly. Second palace lord slowly walked towards Yiqing Luo as her actions were elegant and noble. You also know that the reputation of the secluded palace cannot be destroyed. You hurt my envoy and that is challenging the prestige of the secluded palace. If I don't seek justice for the secluded palace's envoy, how would I be able to bear the title of second palace lord? Young lady, do you think what I said is right? I thought that the secluded palace had long lost its reputation. Yiqing Luo didn't have any intention to retreat as she looked at second palace lord who was walking over with a smile. Second palace lord brought along an oppressive aura. As though she wanted to envelop Yiqing Luo in her oppressive aura. Yiqing Luo's brows raised slightly as her eyes were calm. After all, your envoy can't even command a guard. Until Yiqing Luo finished her words. Second palace lord didn't say a word. She raised her brows in interest as she sized Yiqing Luo up. As though she was surprised about something. This daring young lady was totally unafraid of her oppressive aura? The second palace master's interest was piqued. Her mesmerizing eyes curved even more and the smile in her voice deepened. Young lady, you're right. That's why I've come all the way here to punish these guards who have no foresight. Second palace lord's last word was settled. Faintly there was a biting cold murderous intent. Following that, there was a burst of horrifying air wave. Bam. The second palace master waved his sleeves. The thick profound energy was as fast as lightning as it charged towards the guards of the Abyss Palace who were kneeling in a row and not moving at all. Dong dong dong. Several heavy objects fell to the ground. The dozen or so secluded palace guards didn't even have the chance to scream before they died. They fell to the ground one after another. However, the most frightening thing was not the second palace master's ruthless killing. Instead, it was extremely strange. It was so strange that the guests who were used to seeing killing all stood up. Some even screamed. When many women saw this scene, they all leaned towards the men beside them seeking comfort. On the ground, the guards of the Dark Abyss Palace laid motionlessly. There is a kind of creepy feeling. The dozen guards were originally kneeling in a neat row on the ground. At this moment they were neatly lined up in a row. One by one they neatly fell to the ground. Be it the posture or the expression, they were all exactly the same without the slightest deviation. This was only one of the strangest things. Chapter 2760. Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes as she took a closer look. After staring for some time she frowned slightly. Could it be that the reason why these guards died was because the second palace lord's profound chi had condensed into a blade and slit their necks? But that wasn't right. Why was it that when their necks were slit there wasn't a drop of blood? Was it because this second palace lord's skills were swift? No matter how fast it was impossible that there wasn't a drop of blood. What on earth was going on? Hiss. This second palace lord, what on earth is she doing? She actually killed her own people? Isn't she afraid that after killing those guards no one will protect her? She only has those 4 personal maids by her side. If something really happened, will they be able to protect her? Are you silly? Immediately a guest retorted, didn't we see how powerful those guards were? However, the vice palace master of the gloomy palace only moved her sleeves and easily killed more than 10 guards at the same time. Can't you see her strength? The second palace lord of the Nether Palace is totally able to fight against 100. Why would she need the protection of those guards? Isn't it because she's the second palace lord of the Nether Palace and these guards are unable to resist? Hee hee. Earlier second palace lord's speed. If it was you, would you be able to evade it? That guest who had doubts immediately kept quiet. That's right, the moment the second palace lord made her move, they were all enveloped by the tumbling airwaves, and felt as if their bodies and minds were being burned by raging flames. How would they have any energy left to evade the second palace lord's attack? The guests suddenly recalled that when Yi Luo was surrounded by those guards, he only used his speed and agility to evade the guards' encirclement. But towards those guards he obviously had no way to fight against them. Otherwise he wouldn't have captured Messenger Yan and used him to threaten him, to make those guards leave the Miao tribe. Master Gui Wu said that Yi Luo was Earth Profound 9th grade and was about to step into the Sky Profound realm. Yi Luo wasn't a match for the guards of the Nether Palace. But the second palace lord of the Nether Palace could easily wipe out those guards. Which meant the second palace lord's profound grade was above Yi Luo. In other words, above the Sky Profound realm. Furthermore, it wasn't just the Sky Profound realm. This idea caused an uproar among the guests. Towards the power and strength of the Dark Nether Palace, he was filled with yearning. After all, this other world was a place where the strong ruled and the weak were prey to the strong. Anything that could be explained with fists would never be explained with words. Previously Yi Luo had been very powerful. The scale of the guests was tipping towards Yi Luo. Now, the vice palace master of Gloomy Palace had appeared. The balance of the crowd immediately tilted towards the Dark Palace. The assistant palace master sensed the respect and reverence the guests had for her. A trace of disdain appeared on her face. She narrowed her mesmerizing eyes and chuckled softly. Although it was separated by a layer of black gauze, one could still vaguely see the outline and lines of the face under the veil. Her smile and frown were extremely charming. These useless trash, I have already settled them now. Second palace lord's gaze slowly shifted onto Yiqing Luo as his smile deepened. It's your turn. As the second palace master's voice fell, her eyes, which were originally filled with smiles, at this moment, it suddenly froze into frost. Her arms opened wide as her body floated in mid-air. Chapter 2761. Light laughter spilled out from second palace lord's mouth, extremely savage and extremely complacent. Suddenly she raised her arm high up in the air. The surrounding airwaves surged and surged, flying towards the second palace master's raised arm to attack. Gotcha! A bolt of lightning tore a huge hole in the inky black sky. Second palace lord floated in mid-air. That torn hole was right behind her. It made her look as though she was an Azura who had crawled out from the entrance of hell. It made one's hair stand on end ineffably. The inky black sky surged. The raging wind brought along a raging wave of energy as it spread majestically across the entire public square. Strong. What powerful energy. Everyone's heart almost stopped beating at this moment. This energy had absolutely surpassed Yi Luo's energy by far. Yi Luo, this young genius young lady, was probably going to die here today. The guests felt some pity in their hearts. After Gu Jingyu sensed that man's powerful energy, his body suddenly turned stiff. You still don't intend to make a move? Miss Yi is not Secluded Palace's second palace lord's opponent. His entire body was tensed up as though he was suppressing something. Zhou Xian's gaze didn't turn as he stared at Yiqing Luo's figure without blinking. As though he didn't hear Gu Jingyu's words at all. Gu Jingyu gritted his teeth. This man was wearing a half mask on his face. He couldn't tell the emotions on this man's face at all. Wasn't this man Yi Luo's fiancé? Why was he so indifferent towards Yi Luo's misfortune? Since this fiancé of yours is afraid of death, then don't blame me for interfering in your relationship. Gu Jingyu sensed the second palace lord's profound qi fluctuating and he couldn't bear it any longer. He flicked his sleeves and was about to charge towards Yiqing Luo's direction. However, a single hand stopped him in his tracks. Zhou raised one hand lazily as his narrow phoenix eyes rose upwards. Young Sect Master Gu, what are you trying to do? I'm going to save Miss Yi. Gu Jingyu raised his hand and chopped at Zhou's arm. Young Master Mo, please step aside. Anyone with discerning eyes can tell that you have feelings for little Qing Luo. You went to save her, are you trying to let those people assume that you and little Qing Luo have an affair? Zhou didn't move at all. Gu Jingyu's face sunk and his eyes were filled with ridicule as he shot a glance at Zhou Xian's direction. Yes, this young patriarch admires Miss Yi. Since Lady Ye's fiancé doesn't know how to cherish Lady Yi, then this young master will cherish her. Do you think you're a match for the vice palace master of the secluded palace? Zhou laughed. Cherish? Running to your death and making little Qing Luo feel guilty towards you, remembering you in her heart for the rest of her life. This kind of cherishing? You. Gu Jingyu clenched his fists. This young lord is indeed not the second palace master's opponent, but to have this young lord stand here and watch, this young lord cannot do that. But this young lord will not let you make a move. Zhou smiled elegantly as his arm suddenly hooked around Gu Jingyu's shoulder. Following that, he forcefully pulled Gu Jingyu over to Gui Wu's side. As he walked, he said, Young Sect Master Gu, little Qing Luo's fiancé's feelings towards little Qing Luo, you won't understand. Just stand here obediently, don't let little Qing Luo be distracted and drag her down. Gu Jingyu was still struggling, but no matter what, he was unable to break free from Zhou's restraint. Because of this, Gu Jingyu didn't see it. Chapter 2762. His eyes were focused and serious. In his mind there was a blurry face that he couldn't see clearly. That face was smiling at him. Her coquettish voice seemed to be able to soothe all the bad emotions in his heart. Xian, I want to grow up alone. I want to rely on my own strength to stand by your side and walk side by side with you. The girl was smiling. Vaguely he seemed to see that alluring face. It only took an instant for everything to return to its previous tranquility. Zhou Xian shut his deep eyes. He forcefully suppressed the restlessness that was constantly surging in his heart. He knew that person was Lil Luo heir. Even if their appearances were different. He could also confirm that person was Lil Luo heir. He promised little Luo heir. It would give little Luo a chance to grow. He should believe in Lil Luo. His little Luo heir would become stronger when meeting strong opponents and weaker when meeting weak opponents. There was absolutely no problem. However, there was always a voice in his heart that kept floating in his mind. They were clamoring for him to charge forward. Protect his little Luo heir. Protect his Lil Luo. He would not let Lil Luo be harmed in the slightest. Zhou Xian clenched his fist tightly as he clenched it even harder. Everyone's attention was gathered on Yi Qing Luo's side. No one noticed it. Zhou Xian's eyes were hidden under the mask. His gaze towards Yi Qing Luo was filled with determination and forbearance. Sometimes, they were infatuated with each other. This was the struggle between the love worm and Zhou Xian's consciousness. Love Gu activated his consciousness. He wanted him to protect Yi Qing Luo unconditionally, whereas the memories regarding Yi Qing Luo kept replaying in Zhou Xian's mind. Such a crisscrossing consciousness was activated. This made Zhou Xian's body gradually tensed up. However, no one noticed this. Even if he found out, he would only treat it as worrying about Yi Qing Luo. The other side. Yi Qing Luo raised her head up high and squinted her eyes slightly, looking at the second palace lord who was suspended in midair. The corners of her mouth curled into a teasing smile, revealing a hint of carelessness. It was as if he didn't care about the second palace master at all. But Yi Qing Luo indeed didn't treat the second palace lord as anything. She admitted. The assistant palace master was indeed very strong. Indeed, it was above her profound rank. However, it was not that she was no match for the deputy palace master. Just as Zhou Xian had said. She had a physique that grew stronger when encountering the strong and weaker when encountering the weak. The stronger the opponent, only then would her fighting spirit be aroused. The stronger the opponent, only then would she be able to gain actual combat experience and grow. Most importantly, as the saying goes, the connoisseur recognizes the artistry while the layman enjoys the show. In the eyes of the crowd, the surging waves of terrifying aura of the second palace master were extremely horrifying and intimidating. But, in the eyes of Yi Qing Luo and the other top exponents, that second palace master, kept showing off and creating cool, special effects. From the start, it didn't have the slightest bit of actual strength. In the air, layers upon layers of airwaves were constantly surging. Behind the second palace master, the streaks of lightning that had been torn apart continuously converged and spread out bit by bit. The profound chi at this moment suddenly expanded. The second palace master's gaze was like a torch as he stared coldly at Yiqing Luo. His raised arm instantly pointed downwards towards Yiqing Luo's face. Anyone who dares to offend my secluded palace shall be killed without mercy. The raging waves of profound chi were like huge waves surging as it attacked the biting cold profound chi. At the same time, Yiqing Luo could clearly feel the surging profound chi blowing towards her face. Chapter 2763. Yiqing Luo's brows rose as the smile on her lips blossomed like a poppy. His eyes were gradually filled with excitement. Her eyes flickered and her entire temperament suddenly changed. She was an elegant and lovely little beauty. At this moment she had turned into a bloodthirsty and enchanting demon. Her eyes were filled with smiles as she looked at the incoming attack. This time she had no intention of dodging. Instead, her palms moved and her fingertips danced like a dancing fairy. A red feather fan appeared on her fingertips. Swoosh. The feather fan was opened and the red profound glow lingered around the feather fan. Under the lightning cliff, it gave off an extremely demonic aura. Like a scorching flame, burning continuously. With Yiqing Luo as the epicenter, the ground started to crack, densely like a spider web as the cracks spread out. All these seemed to have taken quite a bit of effort. In actual fact, it was merely a moment. Bam! Vice Palace Lord's attack landed directly. Dust and thick and terrifying air waves rolled, enveloping Yiqing Luo's surroundings instantly. It engulfed and covered up everything in the surroundings. Everyone's gazes were fixed on that area which was engulfed by the numerous air waves. One by one they shook their heads and sighed. Indeed. Earth Profound 9th grade was after all not comparable to the Sky Mystic Overlord and above. However, with just one move he had easily taken care of a 9th grade Earth Profound Realm Xian practitioner. The power of the Gloomy Palace was indeed well deserved. Some even felt that if the Vice Palace Lord was so powerful, then the Grand Palace Lord of the Gloomy Palace could be on the same level as the Overlord? No wonder the Gloomy Palace dared to say such words. To be able to surpass the Imperial Palace within a month. Looking at the Gloomy Palace, they could easily annihilate a bunch of powerful guards. Another Earth Profound 9th grade cultivator which Master Ghost Martial Artist had high hopes of. This Gloomy Palace could absolutely surpass the Imperial Palace. Ding! All of a sudden a crisp sound could be heard. The sound was extremely hurried. Instantly it attracted everyone's attention. Only to see in that dust and air waves. A bewitching red glow gradually spread out. The boundless air waves rolled like a tide. In just a few breaths' time he had completely suppressed that powerful air wave. The red light continued to spread. It dispersed the chi wave created by the second palace master. Amidst the red light, the young girl's red dress fluttered in the wind like a blossoming rose, extremely flirtatious. The girl held a burning fan in her hand and her fingers danced in the air. The fan opened and closed like a fire elf flying in the air waves. Clang! There was the sound of things colliding again. Yiqing Luo opened her arms wide. The fan in her hand unknowingly had already left Yiqing Luo's hand. It was moving at an extremely fast speed. He broke through the layers of air waves created by the second palace master. It struck a long sword in front of the second palace master. The instant the fan hit the long sword, the sword trembled. The layer of black mist that shrouded the long sword suddenly dispersed. Thump! A heavy object fell to the ground. The long sword fell to the ground. At the same time, the body of the second palace master, who was floating in the air, swayed and unexpectedly fell down uncontrollably. The second palace master's robes fluttered like butterfly wings. The black veil on her face was lifted, revealing half of her face. Yiqing Luo's gaze coincidentally fell on that half of her face. Suddenly her eyes dimmed and her body froze. That face, was it her illusion? She didn't remember wrongly. Chapter 2764. Damn it! This unforeseen event caused the assistant palace master's tone to be filled with killing intent. She raised her wrist abruptly. Just as she was about to land on the ground, A thick black fog surrounded her body. His rapidly falling body instantly landed steadily on the ground as light as a feather. She steadied herself and flipped her wrist once again. The long sword on the ground seemed to be sucked by something as it returned to her palm. Second Palace Lord's weapon is just a long sword? The young lady's clear voice was heard from behind. Her hand which was holding the long sword stiffened. Immediately she turned sideways and tried to escape. But her feet had just started to move. He placed a hand on the Second Palace Master's shoulder. The young lady's extremely melodious voice was heard clearly. Isn't Second Palace Lord going to clear the name of Secluded Palace? Why did you run away so impatiently the moment you saw me? The young lady was still smiling. That soft and slender fingers which were pinching on her shoulder looked weak and boneless. But she couldn't break free at all. As for the young lady, she didn't move at all. Under Yiqing Luo's strength, the Second Palace Master turned around. She raised her eyes and met with a pair of narrow and devilish eyes. That pair of eyes were as bright as the stars, sparkling brightly. And faintly there was a glint of flowing light. Just a glance. The Second Palace Master had a feeling as though her soul was being sucked away. It was Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo's seemingly elegant face, but her aura did not diminish at all. The Second Palace Master's heart thumped fiercely. Her mind recalled that person's exhortation in her ear. Be careful, especially towards that lady named Yiqing Luo, you must be on guard. Her ability is not as good as yours, but her potential is terrifying. She thought that in this lower realm, even if she met any genius cultivator, that person could only be considered as a genius from the lower realm. Because of that, she didn't put that person's exhortation to heart. However, at that moment she seemed to have understood what that person meant. The Second Palace Master's eyes turned slightly cold. She had underestimated her opponent. This time round she would not give Yiqing Luo any chance to retaliate. A thought flashed across his mind. The Vice Palace Master's expression suddenly became cold and gloomy. At the same time, profound qi surged from the Assistant Palace Master's body. Two streams of profound qi that looked like black fog shot out from her body, transforming into two rays of profound light. With an irresistible force, it shot towards Yiqing Luo's face, directly piercing downwards. But the Assistant Palace Master's plan failed again. Just as the Second Palace Master's expression changed, Yiqing Luo had already sensed it. At the moment when the Xianxia of the Second Palace Master surged wildly, she immediately let go of her hands and moved to a safe place. Yiqing Luo wasn't flustered in the slightest. The expression on her face was calm and tranquil. It was a stark contrast to the Deputy Palace Master's eyes, which were filled with rage. Is the Second Palace Lord getting serious? Yiqing Luo's sweet voice was mixed with a slight smile. She looked like the girl next door, pure and innocent. However, the Second Palace Master could see it clearly. The young lady's smiling eyes revealed a trace of ridicule. The Vice Palace Master's eyes darkened, her profound qi surged once again. Her eyes were aghast as she gave Yiqing Luo a warning stare. Chapter 2765. As she said that, she looked meaningfully at the long sword in Second Palace Lord's hand. Second Palace Lord's eyes were filled with emotions as her bewitching eyes stared widely. How do you know that this weapon isn't my weapon? Yiqing Luo shook her glower flame fan and held it against her lower jaw. The long sword's body is wide and the sword hilt is thick and the surface is stained with too much filthy blood stench. It doesn't look like a lady's weapon. She raised her brows and continued confidently. This long sword should be given to Second Palace Lord by someone who values Second Palace Lord, to protect Second Palace Lord. Earlier, Second Palace Lord was suspended in mid-air. When she was creating all kinds of powerful pressure, the long sword was firmly placed in front of the Second Palace Master's body. It was because she sensed that the long sword didn't look like Second Palace Lord's weapon. That was why Yiqing Luo directly struck down that long sword. As expected, just as she had guessed, this Second Palace Lord was the source of most of the profound energy. It was because of that long sword. What a observant young lady. When Second Palace Lord heard that, she didn't continue to refute. She sneered as she placed the long sword on her body and spoke coldly. Young lady, since you're looking for death, I shall fulfill your wish. Her words had just ended. Second Palace Lord opened her fingers. A long whip with 9 segments appeared in her hand. The surrounding guests all sucked in a breath of cold air when they saw that long whip clearly. On that long whip, there was a tide of black fog which kept surging. Faintly there was a flash of lightning like flowing light. It gave out a hissing sound. Was that a long whip or a poisonous snake? No matter how the crowd looked, they couldn't see clearly what the soft object under the fog was. When Yi Qingluo saw Second Palace Lord's weapon, her expression dimmed slightly as the serene look in her eyes turned deeper. Long whip. It was indeed a long whip. She didn't see it wrongly. This Second Palace Lord's face. Yi Qingluo stared at the layer of black veil on Second Palace Lord's face. Her gaze was burning as though it was burning. Second Palace Lord was distracted by Yi Qingluo's presumptuous gaze. She clenched the long whip tightly as the black qi lingered around it and struck directly. A powerful wave of qi swept out. The surging waves once again filled the air. Yi Qingluo's lips curled into a sneer as she casually played with the glower flame fan in her hands. The moment the Second Palace Master's attack landed, Yi Qingluo's figure swayed. The two sides clashed. This time round Yi Qingluo didn't adopt any battle tactics. Instead he faced the Assistant Palace Master head-on. Powerful airwaves constantly rolled in the air. The sky that was as dark as ink was covered densely with dark clouds at this moment, and it was mixed with lightning and thunder, causing the atmosphere to be extremely strange. Over here the battle was in full swing. On the other side it was completely impossible to see the silhouettes of both parties clearly, and they could only feel the vast and boundless profound energy. At this moment the guests who were bursting forth and rolling about were in an uproar. A guest pointed at the two people fighting, his face full of disbelief. Did I see wrongly? Just now I saw. Glowing flame fan? That woman called Yi Luo has the gourd flame fan? Gourd flame fan. Isn't that the weapon used by that young hero of the Western continent? Gourd flame fan. There seems to be only one in this world. Why is it in Yi Luo's hands? The appearance of the gourd flame fan aroused the suspicions of numerous guests. Chapter 2766. Most of the people in Nirvana realm knew about Yi Qingluo's deeds. Naturally, they knew about Yi Qingluo's exclusive weapon. Suddenly, the guests thought of something as they exclaimed, Yi Luo, Yi Qingluo. The Overlord has publicly acknowledged the future mistress of the Imperial Palace, dressed in red, devastatingly beautiful. Overlord. Red. Yi Luo, Yi Qingluo? The guests at this moment in their minds regrouped all these symbols together. Everything indicated. The lady named Yi Luo in front of them was the little hero of the West Continent, Yi Qingluo. And only Yi Qingluo could possess the only glower flame fan in the world. And only Yi Qingluo could get so much attention from the Overlord. And only Yi Qingluo at such a young age, her profound grade had already broken through the sky profound stage, becoming the only one in Nirvana realm at such a young age to step into the sky profound stage. Not earth profound 9th grade, but sky profound supreme. She is Yi Qingluo, the Yi Qingluo who is known as the female version of the Overlord. Suddenly among the guests, a sharp female voice was heard. Only to see a slender figure in a cloak covering her face suddenly stood up and stared at the two people who were entangled with each other. Her tone was filled with disbelief. On the side, a figure in the same cloak grabbed the arm of the lady in front and shook it anxiously. The lady in front turned her head to look at the lady behind her, and impatiently shook her hand away. That lady staggered and fell onto the ground. The surrounding was a long table. The lady's head directly hit the long table when she fell. A loud dong sound was heard. It was extremely loud. When the crowd heard it, they felt a pain in their head. But unfortunately, that lady rubbed her forehead and stood up without a word. Not even a cry of pain was made. The lady in front didn't feel guilty because of her own actions. The wide black cloak covered her expression, only to hear her slightly hoarse voice, sharp and ear-piercing. How could she be Yi Qingluo? Impossible. She is obviously a lowly student. The guests only felt that this voice sounded extremely familiar. But at this moment they couldn't recall. The guests sitting next to the woman suddenly looked at each other. Then they stood up at the same time and rushed toward the woman who was rubbing her forehead. The woman was caught off guard and her hands were tightly held by the two guests. The guest raised his hand and lifted the woman's cloak. Under the cloak, a small and delicate face was revealed. The expressions of the two guests suddenly changed. Princess Balon? Wasn't this woman the Northern Wave Continent's princess, Xia Lingling? Why was Xia Lingling here? Wasn't the Northern Wave imperial family in imminent danger? Xia Lingling's position as the princess was already in jeopardy. How could Xia Lingling appear here? Wait, this is Xia Lingling. Then, who was that sharp-tongued lady? When the woman saw that Xia Lingling's face had been exposed, she cursed softly, "Trash." He quickly turned around, intending to leave. However, the crowd who had already found out about Yiqing Luo's true identity. He couldn't wait to find a chance to curry favor with Yiqing Luo. How could they possibly let off that lady who obviously had enmity with Yiqing Luo? Immediately, a few guests swarmed up and held that woman down, lifting the black cloak. That person, wasn't she East Wave's young princess, Lan Ling Nuo? Chapter 2767. After Lan Ling Nuo was discovered, her expression instantly became somewhat ugly. She bit her lower lip tightly. The surrounding people were sizing her up with gazes which made her feel extremely embarrassed. But both her hands were restrained by the guests, so there was no way for her to struggle. Xia Lingling made a nasal sound towards Lan Ling Nuo's direction. Her eyes were filled with fear and uneasiness. The crowd then recalled. Xia Lingling's tongue had already been plucked out by the overlord. So it's these two young princes who are about to become commoners. Do you feel especially slapped on the face? Some of them had long disliked these two princesses' way of doing things, and now that they had the chance, they couldn't help but ridicule them. Previously, I always felt that no matter if it was status, ability or looks, I'm much stronger than Miss Yi. But now, Miss Yi is the little hero of the West Continent, a genius with outstanding ability. The crowd roared with laughter. But they had long forgotten about it. Before this, their own Lan Ling Nuo and Xia Lingling's attitude towards Yiqing Luo was no different. Just as the crowd was making a ruckus, a low and sullen voice, like 1,000 caddy-lead brick, fell heavily on everyone's hearts, pressuring them till they couldn't breathe. Shut up. It was just two simple words. The laughter and clamor stopped abruptly. The crowd turned their gazes towards the man who spoke out. His tall figure was tall and towering. Under the half-gold-rimmed mask, two eyes that were as deep as a lake seemed to be condensed with layers of frost. Those Yiqing Luo's fiancé. No, Yiqing Luo's fiancé. Wasn't he the overlord? This man was the overlord. The crowd's hearts suddenly felt a suffocating feeling. All the words were stuck in their throats. They didn't dare to make any noise. After all, Yiqing Luo was still in a life-and-death struggle with the second palace lord of Secluded Palace. The overlord's emotions were definitely unstable. If they made any noise and touched Yiqing Luo's bad luck, they would definitely be punished by the overlord. After a few big moves clashed against the moves, Yiqing Luo and Vice Palace Lord both retreated backwards. Because of the collision of the two's profound energies, the entire plaza's ground had already cracked open into pieces. The ground was full of holes and gravel. The raised platform and the flags fell to the ground. No matter how the two of them fought, it didn't even affect the guests. Second Palace Master retracted his long whip. His eyes were sinister as if he was dipped in poison, ruthlessly cutting Yiqing Luo's body. You really have some skills. Yiqing Luo's fingertips flicked as she played with the glower flame fan. Her jade-white fingers fused with the raging flames. In the eyes of others, Yiqing Luo was like a fairy who controlled the flames, noble and mysterious. She raised her lips and smiled in a low voice. Her eyes were also smiling. Vice Palace Master, you couldn't beat me before. Now, no matter what method you used to quickly raise your profound level. But I can tell you for sure you can't beat me no matter what. The Vice Palace Master clenched his fists and frowned. What do you mean? Before what? Did I know you before? 3 consecutive questions made Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes. She stared at the Vice Palace Master confidently for some time. Her carefree expression slowly converged and turned grave. Chapter 2768. Second Palace Lord's brows creased even tighter. The eyes under the veil looked at Yiqing Luo in bewilderment. She seemed to be pondering whether Yiqing Luo's actions were some kind of scheme, trying to lure her into a trap. Second Palace Lord's silence. Yiqing Luo saw it all. She could clearly see the unfamiliarity in Second Palace Lord's eyes. Yiqing Luo pursed her lips and paused for a moment. Wait, are you sure you don't recognize me? After she finished her words, she raised her slender fingers and caressed her face. Her fingers were tapping and exploring her face at an extremely fast speed. In just a moment, an extremely thin layer of something like a water droplet rolled on her palm. That is indeed its I Ching Luo. Heavens! Indeed, as the rumors described, a red robe that could topple the world. This is simply able to topple all living things. I will not say that the rumors are fake anymore. The moment Yi Ching Luo's thin mask was removed, the surrounding guests immediately burst into an uproar. It wasn't that they hadn't seen a beauty before, but they had never seen such an exquisite, enchanting beauty. Plus, the beauty was noble and elegant with an unattainable temperament. What's more, once people's gazes landed on her, they couldn't take their eyes off her. The young lady's skin was crystal clear, as fair as snow. Especially that exquisite picturesque face. Devastatingly beautiful, peerlessly enchanting. Slender eyebrows, dazzling eyes. So beautiful that it made one suffocate. The guests exclaimed one after another. To tell the truth, when they saw East Billow's young princess, Lan Ling Nuo, they really felt that Lan Ling Nuo deserved the title of East Billow's #1 beauty. But now that they had seen Yi Ching Luo's real face, Lan Ling Nuo's so-called #1 beauty title was simply a slap on the face. Compared to Yi Ching Luo, the difference was not just 1 or 2 points. And when Yi Ching Luo's face was revealed, Xia Lingling and Lan Ling Nuo, who were restrained by the guests, immediately had a change of expression. Lan Ling Nuo's struggle was forgotten. Her pair of beautiful eyes seemed to be coated with poison as she stared fiercely at Yi Ching Luo's direction. Impossible. How could this be possible? That ugly girl, how could she be Yi Ching Luo? This must be fake. You're all lying to me. Lan Ling Nuo couldn't accept this and roared in anger. Xia Lingling's eyes widened in astonishment. Her body, which was held by the guests, began to tremble slightly. She could not speak, but the frantic shaking of her head showed that she was the same as Lan Ling Nuo, unable to believe everything that was happening before her eyes. Whereas for Yi Ching Luo, towards the guests' reactions, she had no reaction at all. She put the skin back into the profound phoenix ring. Shortly after, she placed her finger on her chin and fixed her charming eyes on the second palace master. Now, do you recognize it? The second palace master's tightly knitted eyebrows had already formed several wrinkles. Second palace lord looked at Yi Ching Luo's devastatingly beautiful face. There wasn't a single bit of shock or hatred in her eyes, which Yi Ching Luo had expected. Gradually, a layer of vigilance appeared in the eyes of the second palace master. He asked doubtfully, "Who are you? Why should this consort recognize you?" The look in the vice palace master's eyes and her unfamiliar tone of voice. This made Yi Ching Luo restrain the emotions in her eyes. Had she seen wrongly earlier? Or this so-called second palace master had lost her memory? If the second palace master was really that person. At the moment she saw her. Chapter 2769. However, just now when the second palace master's veil flew up, it landed on Yi Ching Luo's face. But it was clearly imprinted in her mind. That face had been in her memory for more than 10 years. How could he be mistaken? Yi Ching Luo pursed her pink lips, her eyes congealed slightly as she asked word by word, Are you Yi Ching Qian?" He had seen the face of the deputy palace master from the very beginning. It was no different from Yi Ching Qian's face. That was why she had noticed the weapon used by the second palace master. Then he forced the second palace master to reveal her true weapon, the long whip. Yi Ching Qian's weapon was a long whip. This made Yi Ching Luo even more certain of the second palace lord's identity. However, she took off her human skin and revealed her true appearance. The deputy palace master's reaction made her doubt her own conjecture. Yi Ching Qian. The second palace lord murmured this name softly without any other emotions in his eyes. Obviously, the second palace master was also unfamiliar with this name. Could it be second palace lord really wasn't Yi Ching Qian? Yi Ching Luo's slender brows creased even tighter. In his mind he kept recalling the last time he saw Yi Ching Qian. In her memory, Yi Ching Qian was fed a pill by her to hang on to her life. Then she beat him into a meat patty. Her face was completely ruined. His body had also become a pile of rotten meat. In the end, the wolf saint technique gave up. The effect of the medicine could only last for a few hours at most. Once the effect of the drug wore off, Xianxia would rot and die in agony. However, the second palace master in front of him, regardless of appearance or figure, she was no different from Xianxia. What was going on? Little girl, I don't have time to waste on you. Don't think of any roundabout schemes, I won't fall for it. Vice Palace Master's hair stood on end from Luo's gaze. After the goosebumps, it was followed by the frustration of being humiliated. The second Palace Master's long whip moved, and his profound energy surged, once again setting off raging waves. Profound chi that caused one's heart to palpitate swept out like a tide. The airwaves lingering in the air were also rolling more and more violently. Luo's reaction was swift. At the instance when the second palace master made his move, she moved quickly. A glimmer of light flickered in her charming eyes. With a flick of her fingers, the glowing flame fan unfurled itself from her fingertips. Carrying a profound energy that could contend against the second palace master, she directly welcomed the attack. Meanwhile, Luo's feet floated swiftly. His movement technique, which had been fused with the teleportation secret art, was unleashed to its fullest in this instant. In the blink of an eye, Second Palace Lord's long whip had just collided with Luo's profound chi. The sound of air currents rippling could be heard. The second Palace Master's expression changed as he realized something. She retracted her whip and quickly retreated. However, even if the second Palace Master's reaction speed was already godlike, it was still not enough. However, he was still a step too late. Just as the second Palace Master retreated, a red figure followed like a shadow into the eyes of the assistant Palace Master. The girl's pink lips curled up slightly, and there was a trace of unknown emotion in her eyes. She held out her hand. Her slender fair fingers tugged on the second Palace Master's black veil. The young girl's pink lips moved slightly, and using a voice that only the two of them could hear, she said, "Although second Palace Master's performance made me feel that I might have seen wrongly. But if I don't confirm it with my own eyes, I'm afraid I won't be able to be at ease." Presumptuous. The second Palace Master's eyes widened as she raised her hand and slapped down on the young girl's shoulder. But Luo laughed softly. Chapter 2770. At the same time, under her feet, a complicated footwork was displayed at this moment. Second Palace Lord's palm wind barely brushed past Luo's shoulder and hit the ground. And the black veil on Second Palace Lord's face was pulled down by Luo. That veil was fixed to Second Palace Lord's hair. Luo's pull. She also pulled the hairpin fixed to Second Palace Lord's hair. A head of black hair scattered messily, like ink pouring behind her. Without the black veil covering her face, it was revealed in Luo's eyes. The woman's face was exquisite, a pair of captivating eyes slightly raised, giving a very seductive arc, small and straight nose. Bright red lips revealing a tempting luster. This face. It was indeed Xianxia's face. Exactly the same facial features, not a single bit different. But felt like something was different. For example, temperament. Like feeling. As compared to the previous Xianxia, this face was more captivating. In the most straightforward words, it was the previous Xianxia, even if she was smiling, flirtatious. In other people's eyes, this was indeed very beautiful. But beauty was only that for a moment. Once it was over, it would be thrown to the back of one's mind. But the current Xianxia was different. The current Xianxia had a kind of extremely seductive temperament. The entire person was like a fox spirit transforming into a human. Every move, every smile and every frown. Both of them exuded a kind of unforgettable charm that would be engraved in one's heart. This person was Xianxia, but also not Xianxia. Luo stared at Second Palace Lord's face. Her half-squinted eyes had some fluctuations. At the guest seating, numerous people also saw Second Palace Lord's face. One must know Xianxia's identity was the eldest miss of Three Springs sect. Although Luo took over the position of young sect master. But in the entire Nirvana realm, who didn't treat Xianxia as the next Three Springs sect master? Because of this, Xianxia represented the Yi family, attending many banquets. Her portrait was also circulated in Nirvana realm. Naturally, many people recognized her. Immediately they couldn't help but shout out, "Xianxia." This name, which could be considered familiar, became a hot topic among the guests. The second palace master's ashen face gradually turned uglier and uglier as he listened to the discussions around him. An indescribable emotion surged in her beautiful eyes. Gradually she raised her hand and touched her face. From her mouth she lightly spat out 3 words, Yi Qing Qian. As his voice fell, the second palace master clenched his fists and a strange sneer appeared on his face. She kept her whip and turned around, walking towards the direction of the sedan. Take them, let's go. The second palace master lifted the black veil and sat in the sedan. The 4 beautiful maids each grabbed Mei Yanjun Fei, Sun Yutong and the others, then lifted the palanquin and flew away. Yiqing Luo stood at her original spot with no intention to stop him. They watched as the second palace master's palanquin disappeared into the ink-black sky. The cold and charming voice of the vice palace master came with the wind. Little girl, don't celebrate too early. The palace of darkness will take revenge for your offense. The wind stopped. The voice dissipated. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes as she kept her glower flame fan. Just as she was about to return to Zhou Xian's side. She hadn't even turned around. A strong and powerful arm had already encircled her waist. Chapter 2771. Yiqing Luo's eyes were filled with a smile as she turned around and her arms circled around the person behind her. Ah Xian. His arms tightened around her waist. It was very powerful. It was as if he wanted to rub her delicate body into his. Yiqing Luo had just turned around and was only able to call out his name. The man's overbearing and forceful kiss drowned out all sounds. He kissed her very hard. It was different from the gentleness and cautiousness from before. Instead, it was a kind of ferocity that was close to that of a wild beast, as if it wanted to swallow her whole. Yiqing Luo's breathing was almost swallowed by him. The mask on the man's face was somewhat enchanting. Yiqing Luo's mind went blank for a moment. Her hands gripped the man's collar tightly. In the end, he had almost no strength left. She could only rely on Zhou Xian's arm to support her body. Perhaps it was because Zhou Xian's kiss was too intense. Perhaps it was because they were in public and there were at least 700 or 800 people watching from the side. Yiqing Luo's face was extremely red. The reaction was also very strong. Finally, after this kiss, Zhou Xian let her off when he saw that she was out of breath. However, his arms were still tightly wrapped around her. Ah Xian. Her voice sounded a little broken because of her panting and it was extremely flirtatious. Zhou Xian's body tensed up as he increased the strength of his arms and his warm breath heavily sprayed onto the skin beside her ear. Lilu, I did it. I did it. His voice was hoarse. It was as if he was restraining some kind of emotion. He restrained himself for a long time. He kept murmuring these 4 words. Yiqing Luo didn't quite understand what Zhou Xian meant. But she could also feel the ups and downs of Zhou Xian's emotions. She wrapped her arms around his waist. Her gentle voice comforted him. Zhou Xian placed his head on her shoulder. Lil Luo, I promised you that I would give you the chance to grow, to give you the chance to walk side by side with me. I did it. I didn't stop you from growing. The man's light words fell into Yiqing Luo's ears. She felt as if something had touched her heart fiercely. Her eyes became misty. She tightened her grip, raised her head and said with trembling lips, You remember? I know the face in my mind is you. Zhou Xian gazed deeply at the devastatingly beautiful face in front of him, filled with certainty. After Yiqing Luo heard that, the touch in her heart grew deeper. Her hand moved from his waist to his face. Her slender fingers gently cupped his face. Even if it was covered by half a mask, he was still as peerless as ever. Her fingers trembled slightly. Her charming eyes reflected a man's face. Her Ah Xian did not remember the past. Ah Xian was poisoned by the love goo. Ah Xian who cared about her wholeheartedly. Even in such a dangerous situation earlier, he did not make a move. Just because he had promised her before. Yiqing Luo could almost imagine. Ah Xian, who had been poisoned by the love goo, had to use a lot of willpower to restrain the love goo. Yiqing Luo's nose felt a little sour. Her curly long lashes were stained with some moisture. Her pink lips rose slightly as she cupped Zhou Xian's face. Bit by bit she tiptoed and kissed his lips. Between her lips, a young lady's soft murmur drifted into his ear. Chapter 2772. The man's heart had been disturbed by the young lady's kiss. He heard the young lady's murmuring confession again. His body suddenly tensed up. Every piece of muscle smooth lines. Yiqing Luo nestled in his arms. Naturally she could feel the changes in the man's body. She raised her brows slightly and raised her head. Then she saw the man's pair of overjoyed eyes. It wasn't hard to tell that the man's face under the mask was overjoyed and had a dazed expression. She had confessed her love to Zhou Xian quite a number of times. But this was the first time she confessed to the man who had been poisoned by the love goo, whose mind was only filled with her. Yiqing Luo's eyes curved into a smile. The long and narrow arc was full of charm. She hooked the man's collar with one hand and her laughter was tainted with some evilness. "Ah Xian, I'm already so direct, don't tell me, you're not going to give me any response?" The man seemed to have awoken from his dream as his peach blossom eyes fixed on her face. He still had a dazed look. Yiqing Luo smiled again. Zhou Xian opened his thin lips as his peach blossom eyes were filled with joy. "I love little Luo the most." The words were at the tip of his tongue. Suddenly it stopped abruptly. Zhou Xian's pupils constricted fiercely. A strange emotion surged up in his eyes. Yiqing Luo's smile instantly froze on her face. This was the omen of the centrifugal force goo acting up. What was going on? Why did the centrifugal force goo suddenly act up? Yiqing Luo's heart sank instantly. "Las Luo, he has the centrifugal force goo in his body and you still want to arouse his love for you. The centrifugal force goo will naturally not be happy." Old man Song's helpless voice was heard in her mind. "The main purpose of the centrifugal force goo is to drive the overlord and you apart, to let him kill you personally. Just now, Dizun recalled his past with you in the form of the love goo. The battle between the consciousness of his main body and the love goo has consumed most of his energy. Now you've made him love you even more." Yiqing Luo. She was just touched, just agitated, couldn't help but want to be intimate with his Xian. Was this wrong? "Little girl, now is not the time to talk about right and wrong." Old man Song interrupted Yiqing Luo's thoughts. "This is the Miao tribe's Saintess selection ceremony and numerous guests are watching from the side. What you should consider is how to restrain the venerable overlord of the centrifugal worm. Don't let others see the abnormality of the venerable overlord." Old man Song's reminder made Yiqing Luo's heart sink. Right, there were so many guests around, especially in the Miao tribe's territory. Once the news of Zhou Xian being poisoned was spread out, not only would Zhou Xian suffer from a large-scale attack, the gloomy palace would definitely make use of this opportunity to make the arch palace fall and rise. Yiqing Luo clenched her fists tightly. When she saw Zhou Xian's pair of warm and affectionate peach blossom eyes, gradually turning into an unfamiliar icy chill, she abruptly raised her hand and hooked onto Zhou Xian's neck. Zhou Xian had just switched modes and had yet to react. She directly kissed his lips. Moreover, the kiss was very forceful. Zhou Xian's muffled groan could be heard faintly. It was obvious that his lips were broken. Yiqing Luo didn't bother about it as her other hand hooked onto his neck. Zhou Xian's brows creased as he raised his hand and wanted to send this audacious young lady flying. But when his gaze fell onto that alluring face, his hand paused slightly. The delicate soft body that was forcefully stuffed tightly clung onto his body. The young lady's fragrance seeped into his nose. Chapter 2773. This alluring face was very unfamiliar. But Zhou Xian felt that it was familiar. In his mind, he automatically overlapped this face with the bold lady who had been rude to him several times before. This was Yi Luo. Zhou Xian's eyes flickered slightly, his arm was about to move. The young lady's hand wrapped around his body, as if soft and boneless, hanging on his body softly. The young lady's lips were a little distance away from him. Vaguely, a trace of crystal could be seen. Yiqing Luo raised her eyes, her long and narrow eyes, deliberately dyed with a trace of poppy-like charm, smiled wickedly. "Overlord, let's talk about a deal, how about it?" The young lady's fragrance, like orchid, blended with his breath. Zhou Xian faintly felt that his heart was spreading some kind of emotion, constantly gnawing at his heart. Trying to avoid this complicated emotion. Trying to push the young lady away. But the young lady came closer again. Their lips were almost touching. The young lady's enchanting eyebrows became more and more soul-stirring. That pair of glistening eyes, the rays of light flowed, sparkling. Just looking into her eyes, it was as if he had sunk into her charm. unable to extricate himself, and unable to control himself. Diamo Xian's eyes deepened. This woman was really an evildoer. An evildoer who bewitched people, bewitched the masses. There had never been anyone like her who could affect his emotions, his thoughts. But she was able to break his taboo time and time again. This feeling of being affected by a woman, his emotions. It really made him unhappy. Diamo Xian's eyes deepened. As if he was pondering about something. Or as if he was quietly looking at something. The man's eyes were very deep, very dark. Just looking at his eyes. There was no way to tell what kind of mood he had at this moment. But even if she couldn't see his peerless beauty in full view. But just staring at his eyes, looking at his smooth lines, smooth chin, and that as if tempting her to kiss his thin lips. It was also a delightful thing to see. Probably because Yiqing Luo's naked eyes stared a little too much. The man's long and narrow peach blossom eyes, slightly raised a little. He chuckled. Their lips were almost touching and she could feel his breath. Yiqing Luo's cheeks turned slightly red. However, her expression was still as charming as before. What kind of deal? Tell me about it. Diamo Xian's eyes deepened and his voice was filled with ridicule. Seeing that the man had a reaction, Yiqing Luo moved her lips away and whispered into his ear. Accompany me until the end of the ceremony. Accompany you? Diamo Xian's peach blossom eyes curved as the corners of his mouth curled up, becoming more and more playful. Yiqing Luo expressed that looking at a half-covered beauty at such a close distance was really a test of her self-control. There was a smile in her voice. Yes. What are the benefits? Diamo Xian didn't accept, but he didn't reject either. Asking like this meant that there was a chance. Yiqing Luo's eyes lit up slightly as her voice hooked out a tinge of coquettishness. After this ends, I'll be at your disposal. You can do whatever you want to me. Anything? Diamo Xian repeated these 4 words with a smile which didn't look like a smile. His eyes looked at her and suddenly lowered his voice. A little rascal. Including sleeping with you? Yiqing Luo was stunned. She didn't expect such a serious Diamo Xian to say such rascal words. Her charming eyes rose, meeting Diamo Xian's peach blossom eyes which were filled with ridicule. Chapter 2774. Looks like you really like me. Diamo Xian's voice was extremely light without any extra emotions. Yiqing Luo expressed that this Diamo Xian looked like an abstinent male god. An inviolable look. She smiled with her eyes curved, seemingly very happy. Yes, I like you very much. The young lady didn't conceal her loving gaze. This made Diamo Xian's thin lips inexplicably pulled into an arc. But the next moment, there was another inexplicable emotion that began to disturb his heart. There was a voice in his mind. It kept telling him, push away the young lady. Stay away from the young lady. Gradually it formed a very powerful thought. Kill the young lady. His brows tightened, feeling a little strange about this inexplicable emotion. Obviously he was hugging the young lady. Flirting with the young lady. Under this kind of atmosphere, it was impossible to have the thought of killing the young lady. But this kind of thought really existed. His body had a strange feeling. Diamo Xian's peach blossom eyes flashed a trace of fluctuation. He once again fixed his gaze on Yiqing Luo. He wanted to find an answer from Yiqing Luo. The young lady was still smiling. A pair of sparkling eyes as if bearing thousands of peach blossoms. Reflected in her eyes was only his shadow. For some reason, Diamo Xian had already abandoned the strange emotion in his heart. His thin lips moved, spitting out a word, all right. As soon as he said that word, a cold light flashed in his eyes. The smile on the young lady's face became even more brilliant. Like a blooming poppy releasing its most seductive power. Diamo Xian's mind moved. Suddenly his big palm covered the back of Yiqing Luo's head, lowered his head and kissed her lips. This kiss was very affectionate. Gentle as if water could be squeezed out. Yiqing Luo almost indulged in this kind of torturous kiss. But Diamo Xian only kissed familiarity until his breath covered her layer after layer. He released her. Yiqing Luo's eyes were stained with a trace of crystal because of his kiss. He let go. Yiqing Luo's thoughts were still empty as she grabbed Diamo Xian's collar. Staring at Yiqing Luo, the man's eyes dimmed slightly, covered with a layer of desire. What a lovely little vixen. He really wanted to devour her bite by bite. However, the timing and location were both wrong. Thinking of the young girl's cunning, he smiled charmingly and said, "Including sleeping with me." Zhou Xian's expression darkened further. Forget it, since the girl wanted him to accompany her. He accompanied her. Perhaps after obtaining her, they would feel that she was no different from other women. He wouldn't be affected by this woman anymore. Zhou Xian retracted his breath and tightened his arms, bringing her petite body into his embrace. His low and husky voice moved closer to her ear and laughed. "This is the interest. After tasting it, it's not bad. I will reluctantly agree to your deal." Yiqing Luo was still in a daze. He couldn't help but sigh. Zhou Xian's honey trap really made her unable to stop herself. However, at least he had reached an agreement with him. As long as Zhou Xian sat with her properly, and finished participating in this saintess ceremony, the rest of the matter would be discussed in private. Yiqing Luo hugged his waist and buried her head in his chest. The man didn't resist, nor did he have any intention to push her away. Yiqing Luo was assured as she hugged Zhou Xian's waist, and walked towards their position. Chapter 2775. No matter if it was Yiqing Luo's real identity or her real looks. Furthermore, the overlord was present at the scene, and even displayed affection with Yiqing Luo in public, breaking the rumors of abandonment. All kinds of things. All the guests who were watching were shocked. They recalled that they had previously spoken out to humiliate Yiqing Luo, belittling the imperial palace in front of the emissary of the Palace of Darkness and the vice palace master. Their hearts were in their throats. However, the two people who had disturbed everyone's mind did not seem to be affected at all. NN lovingly returned to his seat. He even acted as if there was no one else around, showing off his affection and feeding him food. Naturally it was Yiqing Luo who was feeding Zhou Xian. Peach, who was sitting by the side in a daze, looked at Yiqing Luo's smiling face, peeling grapes for Zhou Xian and feeding him. Her mouth twitched. "After not wearing the mask, you can let go of yourself?" Just now, when he saw the two of them, the atmosphere was clearly different. His Majesty's aura had also changed. The group of them thought that Lord Dizun was suffering from the effects of the centrifugal goo. He was about to flip out on the spot. He didn't expect to be stuffed with dog food instead. Overlord, he. Xiao Jin held Yan Xiaoyi, whose expression wasn't very good as he looked at Zhou Xian worriedly. "His centrifugal force goo, will it affect?" "No problem." Yiqing Luo placed the grape into Zhou Xian's mouth. The man sat on the cushion lazily. His feet were slightly bent. One hand rests on the knee. He looked lazy and noble to the extreme. When Yiqing Luo's grape was brought to his lips, he lazily opened his mouth. His thin lips brushed past Yiqing Luo's fingers faintly. Yiqing Luo's fingertips trembled, but she didn't say a word as she continued to peel the grape skin while glancing sideways at Xiao Jin. "The overlord has always been honest and trustworthy. He promised me that he will accompany me till the end of the grand ceremony, so he will stay till the end of the grand ceremony." Her words were directed at Xiao Jin. But in actual fact it was for Zhou Xian to hear. As smart as Dizun was, how could he not understand the deeper meaning of the girl's words? He narrowed his long and narrow eyes. His thin lips curled up into an extremely shallow arc. When the girl gave him another grape, he opened his mouth and bit the girl's finger. A slight prickling pain made Yiqing Luo frown as she stared at him resentfully. Zhou Xian loosened his grip and casually shifted his gaze onto Yiqing Luo's face as he gave a casual smile. "This lord is not an honest and trustworthy person. Everything depends on this lord's mood." Yiqing Luo, "Fine, you're the boss. Couldn't she spoil him to death?" Yiqing Luo took a deep breath and smiled. "Yes, I will definitely serve the overlord well so that the overlord can maintain his mood." Her voice was dry and stiff. Even when he smiled, it felt like a fake smile. Xiao Jin and the others couldn't help but shiver when they heard the word concubine, rubbing their arms. However, a certain man was in a good mood and nodded with satisfaction. Yiqing Luo. After his goo worm was cured, he would definitely kneel on the washboard. Yiqing Luo suppressed the surging emotions in her heart and was about to take the grapes to serve this Buddha properly. Her peripheral vision suddenly caught a glimpse of something. Her slender brows creased as she immediately drew out her handkerchief and wiped off the grape juice on her fingers. Chapter 2776. Zhou Xian raised his brows, puzzled by Yiqing Luo's actions. Was she not going to serve him anymore? Yiqing Luo didn't look at him as she lifted her feet and walked towards a certain direction. Zhou Xian narrowed his peach blossom eyes as he slowly propped himself up. That was where Miao Yi was. At this moment, Miao Yi was standing beside the corpses of the Palace of Darkness guards, calmly commanding the Miao guards to carry the corpses. Second Elder Miao and Fourth Elder Miao stood beside her, their brows tightly furrowed as they spoke to Miao Yi. His emotions seemed to be somewhat agitated. From time to time, Miao Yi would glance sideways and respond to the two elders. Meanwhile, the two elders' faces turned uglier and uglier. He seemed to be arguing with Miao Yi about something. Yiqing Luo also saw this scene, hence she immediately rushed over. Looking at Second Elder Miao's fawning attitude towards the Palace of Darkness just now. Later on, the Vice Palace Master of Gloomy Palace appeared. Second Elder Miao's heart was probably biased towards the Dark Nether Palace. He might even vent his anger on Miao Yi because of this. Although Miao Yi looked very calm and collected at the moment, and her way of doing things also had her own style. However, Miao Yi was only a 14 or 15-year-old girl after all. Before returning to the Miao tribe, she was still that simple-minded girl who would occasionally reveal a hint of cuteness. Miao Yi had undergone such an earth-shattering change in just a month. Thinking about it, Miao Yi must have had a very hard time in the Miao tribe this month. But Yiqing Luo didn't intend to care about Miao Yi's hard work for this 1 month. After all, this was the path that Miao Yi had chosen. Become the Miao tribe leader, become the Miao tribe's holy maiden. The pressure on Miao Yi would be even greater than now. The days ahead would only be more difficult than now. These were things that Miao Yi had to bear. Before he even got close to the corpse of the Palace of Darkness guard. Second Elder Miao's angry voice rang out, Miao Yi. Since you want to be the leader of the Miao tribe and become the saintess, shouldn't you prioritize the interests of the Miao tribe? Fourth Elder Miao also tried his best to persuade her. That's right, Miss Miao. You are the only direct descendant of the Miao tribe. Everything in the Miao tribe will belong to you. For the sake of the Miao tribe, it's just a small matter to her. However, this will be of great help to the Miao tribe. Miao Yi spat out the word without hesitation. Her face was cold and gloomy. He was probably annoyed by the two elders' harassment. After saying this, she turned around and was about to return to the waiting room for the selection of the Holy Maiden. Second Elder Miao immediately chased after her. Miao Yi, what do you want? Whatever conditions you have, just state them. I don't want anything. Miao Yi halted her footsteps as she decisively rejected. Second Elder Miao, I won't open my mouth to Qing Luo. She's my friend, not a tool to be used. Isn't it normal for friends to help each other? Second Elder Miao was still unwilling to give up. Miao Yi could not be bothered to say anything more to Second Elder Miao. Suddenly he heard a sweet voice with a smile. What are you talking to me about? Miao Yi was stunned as her gaze turned towards the direction of the voice. She saw that young lady who was clad in raging flames looking at her with a light smile. Miao Yi's heart quivered slightly.